Hi, Ben. Welcome to Nature, the Drug of Choice. I have today with me a hypnotist. And ever since I started this podcast, this is episode 17, people have said, well, when are you going to talk about hypnosis? When are you going to actually, cover hypnosis? And so we are doing that tonight. And I wanted to say before I have Ben come on, this is Ben Herman of Herman Hypnosis. He's in Toronto. And he found me because he was daydreaming, maybe a little hypnotized at his day job. We all do that. And what did you daydream about? What were you kind of pondering that day?
For sure. I was working on a machine that is very monotonous, doesn't require a lot of attention. And so my mind began to wander. And I came up with this idea that I thought was new. Why don't we do hypnosis while we hike through the forest? The meditative practice of walking, there's nature all around to draw parallels and build metaphors from. And so I did some research after deciding this is going to be my thing. And of course, I stumbled into you, the Hypnotic Hiker.
Yeah. I love that. And there's so much space and room for all of that. I mean, the hundreds of thousands of acres of forest.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really wonderful to have you contact me. And so many times we get those messages on social media that we don't even know if they're real. But when you sent yours, I knew you were the real deal. And we talked, I think, that day. And then since then have shared some things. And I love your Instagram posts, those
Thank you.
The presuppositions, I guess, is what those are.
The overall term for them would be empowering questions. In the end, as long as we both know what we're talking about, who cares what they're called?
Okay. So I want to cover that today and have you read a few of those because they're hypnotic in themselves, and I'm sure they're designed to be. But when I was searching for Herman Hypnosis to look at your website, of course, what came up was Pee Wee Herman hypnotizes women on stage with using Dr. Mondo, and Dr. Mondo was a puppet. And it's so bizarre, but it was really funny. And, apparently she was hypnotized, but who knows? It was fun to watch. And so tell me about what your thoughts about stage hypnosis are. Do you have any ideas about like how that works or why people even do it?
Part of me wants to harp on about, the holy sanctity of this incredibly powerful tool. But on the other hand, I do realize that hypnosis is a tool. And if people choose to use it for entertainment, if people choose to use it for recreation, if they choose to use it for healing, these are all, I guess, acceptable uses of a tool.
Well, I'd never thought of it that way. I think stage hypnotism kind of put hypnosis on the map. But what do people when they find out you're a hypnotist, what is usually their first response to that?
So it depends how they find out. If they find out that I do this professionally as like hypnotherapy kind of work, the first question is always, "Can you help me quit smoking?" Always, without a doubt. That's a bit of a complicated one. I usually say no.
Do you say only if you want to?
That's part of it.
Only if you really, really want to.
And if they hear just that I'm a hypnotist, then the first thing they ask is always, can you make me dance like a chicken or cluck like a chicken? Any of those cliche stage hypnosis tropes.
And what was your response?
My response is usually only if you want me to. But if I'm feeling particularly sassy, the answer might be it costs extra for that.
Yeah. What were you doing in your life when you decided to become a hypnotist, to take the training? What was going on, if you want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. My history with hypnosis as a concept is quite a long one.
Mm.
I've known about it since a very young age because of warnings from my grandfather not to mess with it because it's a powerful tool, and
Really?
powerful tools require respect to be used safely.
Mm.
Um, so, of course, me being young, immediately I disobeyed that and learned as much as I could about it on my own. And the interest has always been there. The idea of, as a child, it would have been more, one mind imposing will on the other. But as I've, matured and learned more about it, what I think is so much more fascinating is two minds connecting and sharing with each other. I think it's such an incredible and beautiful thing that hypnosis affords.
You know, I don't think I've ever heard another hypnotist say that. And that is what's happening, because my clients will say, "How did you know that I had a red dress on in my vision of myself?" And at the end, you said, "And the color red is more bright and beautiful than it's ever been. And every time you see the color red, da 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 da." They're like, "How did you know?" And I said, I don't know how I know. I just knew. And is that the super consciousness? Is that the collective consciousness? So what is that? Do you have an idea about how that
Uh,
works?
I can think about it from two ways. On one hand, I do think that when a hypnotist and a hypnotic subject are in that kind of conversational and communication loop, I think that their brains do tend to match up. Have been many times when I've been working with a client, and I will know without a doubt what the next words that will come out of their mouth will be.
Mm.
It's a spooky thing, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a very fulfilling experience to be
Yeah,
connected with someone like that.
you're a
And
natural. You're a natural. You're tuned in. Um,
thank you.
uh, sure, I've talked to a lot of hypnotists just to looking for mentors. Want to mentor someone that wants to work. In the flow center. The days I'm not there, and I do in person sessions, and they would like totally freak out because, well, then they're going to see my scripts. If I'm using scripts, how do I use the scripts if it's in person? Because they got trained on how to do it virtually, I guess. And
Mhm.
I just was baffled. I'm like, okay,
I don't
I
think the
don't think we're a good fit. Anyway,
yeah, the listeners probably can't see me, but I made a bit of a face there with scripts. I think scripts are an excellent learning tool.
yeah,
However, using them as your hypnosis really
yeah.
limits you so much. It takes away all your flexibility.
And you're not tuned in.
Yeah.
You're not tuned in, and I do use them very occasionally, kind of as a reference. When I'm
Mhm.
prepping for someone, you kind of look through and like, oh my god, I forgot about this one. This is so
Mhm.
great because it does da 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 da. And but hypnosis, in the whole process, there is giving a suggestion and then watching the response. So
I'm
if
so
you're
glad you
if
said
you're
that.
saying, you're on an elevator and you're reading something, and you're on an elevator and they're over there going, you know, I don't like
Yeah.
elevators. Or you're
You know,
floating down on a raft in a pool and they have make a face, they're afraid of water. So you really have to be, watching and adjusting.
I'm so glad you said that because a question I get asked by some of my peers is how is it that you get consistent results? And the answer is always I try something. And if I see that it's not working, if I feel like I'm not getting a good response, then I switch tactics.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
only do that if you observe.
Right. Have you ever used ideometer responses? I don't know if I'm saying that word right, but
Mhm. I do. Uh, Generally, the way I was trained on them and the way that I find very helpful is to set up a yes and a no signal.
yeah.
Uh, should I explain what ideomotor responses
Yes.
are for the
Yes.
listeners? Yeah. So the idea of ideomotor responses are an unconscious motor response. So that is movement, whether that be an arm or a hand, in response to an idea. So, for example, when somebody gets scared, there's an instant ideomotor response. Their shoulders might go up, they might tense, they might jump a little bit. That's an example of a maybe not so positive ideomotor response. However, when somebody's incredibly relaxed, the idea of feeling relaxed, that emotion, leads to the motor response of your muscles relaxing, your breathing slowing down, your heart rate reducing, your blood pressure lowering, even.
Your
So
mouth
that's,
opening.
there you go, exactly, all these things. And we can use them in hypnosis by actually arbitrarily tying any idea we want to any ideomotor response. So the way I usually use that is by setting up two index fingers. The left one means yes, the right one means no. And what you then have once you get that going is a visual way to see what the unconscious is thinking. So you can ask a question. Is it time to move on? And you wait for a response, a yes or a no. Are you done with this problem? Yes or no. And you can use that as a way to gauge.
Yes, that was something that I know I studied the American Council of Hypnotist Examiners, Gil Boyne's organization, and you studied more of the Ericksonian or neo Ericksonian practice. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I studied with the incredible Mike Mendel.
I almost want to take training again because it's been like 22 years. I'm sure there's a lot of new ways of looking at things. Maybe I don't know. So I want to move on to your stories. Now, was this story about bitter laughter one of your Instagram Sunday stories?
I believe, oh no, so my Sunday story, that's something that I just did once, and I might continue doing it.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, that was the one of the boy lost in the woods.
Yes.
And
that
that's
is
a
based off a true
metaphor.
story.
It's based on a true story, but it's a metaphor, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And I can't explain the metaphor or it'll lose its power, but.
No, don't. Yeah, don't explain it. But I want to ask you, though, you said in there, and 97.3% of the story is true. So can you share what that
What that was about?
Yeah, what is that about?
Yeah, for sure. That was intentional.
Uh-huh.
There's a group of techniques or a way of looking at communication called NLP, neurolinguistic. And in NLP, there's a concept called a double bind. And I'm kind of pulling back the curtain here, so don't look too closely. But the reason I did that is to set myself up for a double bind. So what I said there is, these stories are 99.975% true. So what you could do is choose to let your conscious mind figure out which parts of the story are true while your unconscious understands the meaning. That was one part of the double bind.
Okay.
The other part is, or you could just choose to let yourself listen to the story like a story and have your unconscious integrate the knowledge effortlessly. Mm-hmm. That's the other part of the double bind. Now you'll notice they both lead to the same result, which is your unconscious mind understanding the metaphors in the story.
Is one of them more for people who take things very literally and another for people who take things more indirectly? So you're kind of covering both ways?
Honestly, I didn't really think about it like that.
It sounded like that.
It makes sense, yeah. I think that definitely would make sense for sure.
If someone's really literal, they're going to go, 93.75%. And someone else that says, just let your mind, whatever, as your subconscious mind, that's more indirect. So you might have just instinctively covered both of those levels of suggestibility. So Ben has a great Instagram account. He posts very regularly. So we will put links to that in the show notes. The Sunday story about the boy being lost in the woods is just phenomenal storytelling. I watched it to the end. I didn't even find myself like looking around trying to find something else. I was pretty captivated.
Thank you.
I appreciate quality, and I think people do too, really appreciate quality. And storytelling is such a beautiful art. And I love how you bring nature into your stories and um, and all of that. So, with that, talk to us about those empowering questions first, and then let's move on to the story of bitter laughter. So tell us about your. Oh, actually, I picked one out. Can I read it? I hope I read this right. So, what feeling would be most useful to you in your current stage of life, and how soon will you embody that? So, see, that's that double bind, isn't it? Or is that the presupposition where you assume,
I'd say
making
this
the
is more,
assumption they're going to do it either way?
yeah, I'd say this is more presupposition there.
Okay.
There are some questions that I've done that have elements of a double bind to them.
Okay.
I'd have to look through and figure out which ones.
Okay. So, what I want to ask you, what do you think is happening to someone's conscious mind when they're reading those empowering questions? They're kind of tongue twisters, aren't they?
A bit, and they're structured in a very specific way to cause two things. So the first part is to cause introspection. So there's this idea that when we ask a question or when we're asked a question, we generally find an answer for it.
Yes.
A really entertaining example that was shared with me by Mike is a guy walks into a therapist's office and says, "Therapist, I'm stupid." And the therapist makes the terrible mistake of asking, "Well, why are you stupid?" And so he comes up with a million answers why he's stupid. Well, I don't eat properly, so my blood sugar levels are all off, and my family is stupid, so it runs in the genetics, and all these things that really aren't very stupid concepts to understand, and yet he was asked the wrong question.
Yeah.
So the point of these is to ask the right questions, to get us thinking about the right things. And then the second part is the call to action. So actually, what can you do better and how are you going to do it?
Yeah.
That's kind of the overall format.
Okay. All right. So, what is bitter laughter?
I'm glad you asked. This is an interesting one. I was having a rough week and I found myself laughing bitterly at something. One of those situations where the outcome could be construed as positive, but in the end, it's still not a great outcome. So these times of, for example, this is a pretty dark example, but somebody gets hit by a car, and they break a rib in their leg. Well, hey, at least they still have their arm, and you can laugh about that, but it's not necessarily happy laughter. Laughing where joy isn't necessarily the cause, perhaps ironic laughter or laughter to cope would be another way to see it.
Okay, so lightening up of the situation.
Yeah. And one of the things I realized is that even though this laughter was bitter and it was coming from a pretty hurt place, I was still laughing. I was still getting more blood to my brain. I was still getting my heart pumping. I was still releasing those good brain chemicals because, lucky for us, our body doesn't differentiate between bitter laughter and happy laughter. And so I just felt kind of compelled to do a quick explanation of the concept on my Instagram.
Do you want to go into that a little more about what your situation was? Is it important to tell that story, or would you rather talk more about how come the brain doesn't know the difference between bitter laughter and joyous laughter?
So I'm not going to talk about the brain chemistry because I don't feel I'm qualified. And I don't really want to talk about stuff that I don't really know what I'm talking about. In terms of the story, I don't want to share that particular story because it's still a little bit too recent. However, I'd be more than happy to share another example in my life where bitter laughter ended up helping immensely.
Okay.
So, a bit of backstory. So, when I was quite young, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And from a very young age, we kind of knew that it would progress and that he wouldn't be with us forever. However, in 2005, I believe, he had a brain surgery, did radiation therapy, did chemotherapy, and he went into remission for 15 years. So I
Oh,
got 15 more years with my dad.
wow.
And, you know, when I'm that age and things go well for that long, you start to think this is how things are going to go forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Hmm.
didn't have enough life experience or context to really appreciate what was going on. And when I was traveling, I was overseas studying computer science. I got the message that in his routine MRI, the cancer had come back.
Mm.
And
How
of
old were
course,
you? I'm sorry. How old were you when you found out that it had come back?
originally, it was 20, I would have been 19 years old. And of course, this was upsetting for me. But again, there was that idea in the back of my head, well, he's survived it once, he's going to survive it again. Unfortunately, I learned that that wasn't the case. However, as it sort of progressed and got worse, I ended up flying back home to spend some time with him. And during this time, something very strange happened. Our dog, Mika, started having problems walking on his foot. And we were all worried. We were kind of joking around. Oh, he's such a drama queen, right? Dad is
Getting
really
all the
kind of
attention.
yeah. Dad is kind of dying of cancer right now, and the dog has a problem. Okay,
Yeah.
that's like the first example of that bitter laughter. It's like, okay, buddy, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it came to a head when we found out that the reason Mika was limping was because he had cancer too in
Oh.
one of his toes.
Oh.
And it became one of the most laughter filled things in the household at that time because when you're faced with great adversity that there's nothing you can do about, one of the only options is to either laugh or get pulled under that wave.
Mm.
And we were in this situation where our dad was, struggling with brain cancer. We knew that the prognosis wasn't good. And our dog, he got toe cancer. So there was this joke,
Okay.
oh,
Yeah.
Mika,
Yeah.
you poor thing, you have a sore toe, you have toe cancer.
Yeah.
It became this very bitter laughter because of course, on one hand, now we're going to lose our dad and our dog. But on the other hand, there was this kind of nature had given us this surreal comedy of I'm trying to think of the right way to word this, but it's something like a surreal reflection or a comedic reflection where
Mm-hmm.
on one hand was this huge serious life-threatening issue and on the other hand was a mirror of it that was not benign by any means but so much less intense, so much less impactful. And the only thing we could do was laugh.
Yeah.
And so while we were, spending time with my dad, spending time with the dog, laughing about this, we began to realize that, yeah, this sucks. There's no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really
Mm-hmm.
shitty situation.
Mm-hmm.
But where's the good in it? Or if there's no good, where is the good that we can make of it?
Yeah.
Because something I learned through just dealing with hard stuff through my life is that when there's no other option, when the hard stuff is going to happen and there's nothing you can do about it, one of the healthiest things to do is find a way to laugh and to realize that that laughter doesn't take away from the sanctity of the experience. It doesn't take away from the dignity of the experience. All it does is it makes it easier for you to continue living life, even in adversity. And I
Yeah.
think that's the essence of bitter laughter.
When my dad died, the the man that did the eulogy, and I wish I could remember what he said, but he said, in life we have three things: something, something, and humor, or maybe human folly. And he was really kind of saying what you're saying is that, and he said, and Bob Alexander did the best he could with the first two, but he really nailed, the last one. And my dad was a very funny man. And I remember when he was dying, he was like, "Why are y'all all just moping around?" He said, "Valerie, get back to the office and see your clients. And y'all just, stop. You're depressing me." So it was,
Yeah.
he wanted to be funny even then.
Mm.
So I love that. Did you come up with that term, bitter laughter? Is that something you created?
I'm not going to claim I created it because I don't think there's any combination of two words that I can claim ownership of. But it's a name that kind of came to me, and it felt very fitting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know that I can claim Hypnotic Hiker. I haven't seen anyone else, but I'm sure there's another one out there somewhere. Um, I want to talk just very briefly about what your grandfather said to you. He said, "Be leery of hypnosis or something of hypnosis because it is a
Mhm.
very powerful tool." Was he hypnotizing you then, do you think? Authority figure?
You know,
No, the subconscious doesn't hear, "Don't do that, don't smoke." It just
yeah.
hears smoke. So I
Uh,
think he put that bug in your ear.
Oh, I think absolutely he did. I don't think it was intentional, but yeah, there's an excellent book called Monsters and Magical Sticks. There's no such thing as hypnosis with a question mark at the end. That goes into stuff like that, of
Oh.
hypnosis that isn't traditional hypnosis. And
Mhm.
it talks about that authority.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I think it absolutely was a form of that.
Yeah, I don't know the hypnotist that uh, Charles Tibbetts or Dave Ellman. Anyway, one of them has the five ways to become hypnotized. One is authority figure. Two is anything under intense emotion. Three,
Mhm.
anything you hear over and over again. Four, identification with a parent or group. Or five, hypnosis. So there
Mhm.
was this authority figure and the emotion of him saying, "Don't ever do that." So
And of course, if somebody told me not to do something as a kid, I had to see why.
yeah, oh sure,
So it was
sure.
like a triple whammy there.
So do you hike?
I do when I
I guess you
can.
do when you can, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up right across from a medium-sized park. Like literally, I can see the park from the front porch.
Mm,
And
nice.
so I did a lot of short hikes as a kid. We spent a lot of time in Rattlesnake Point, which is a place an hour or so out of Toronto in the Halton
Mhm,
Hills region.
mhm.
Beautiful, lots of big caves and rock walls. And
Yeah. So are you trying to get a group together to take out?
right now, it's in the planning phase. I
Mhm.
still haven't decided if it's in the planning phase because I'm not ready to start, or if it's in the planning phase because I need to plan it more. uh, I have
Yeah.
faith.
Yeah,
But yeah, that is something I want to do.
I put mine off. The idea was just up there, and this woman who has a publication, online publication for 50 plus, and she and I were talking in a networking group, and she goes, "Well, let's just do it. Let's just pick a date, and I want you to write an article about it. Just pick a date, and I'll just invite all my friends." And I'm like, "Okay." And I did it, and the date came, and I think 23 women showed up,
Wow.
and we hiked around. But it was right after the lockdown was lifted, so they hadn't been out in so long, and they all just wanted to talk to each other.
Hmm.
So I had maybe like three or four that were actually listening to what I was saying, and the others were just
Yeah.
doing this, which was fine. They had a good time, but I think I did one every month for a year or two, maybe up to 2 years. And then it sort of dwindled down because, people had many more options. Um, and it was either too hot, too cold, it was too muddy, too something. I hike all the time. I don't care
Hmm.
what the temperature is.
I grew up camping in like the Canadian wilderness. So out there,
Yeah.
whatever the weather is, you're there and you're gonna enjoy yourself.
You're
So
gonna enjoy
I,
yourself.
I
Yeah.
totally understand that. One of my favorite camping trips, it rained all 4 days.
So what else would you like to talk about? Hypnosis, hiking, hypnotic hiking.
This is actually an idea I was thinking about, finding inspiration through nature. So a lot of people, when they look at nature, they see an obstacle, something to overcome, a rock in the way, a vine that you have to cut through, a bush that you have to walk around. But what I'd propose is next time you're out in nature, instead of looking at an obstacle as an obstacle, take a closer look. See what it is exactly. Is it a shrub? Is it growing from a root that sticks out of the ground? Are the roots visible above the soil? Are the leaves facing upwards or horizontal or sideways? Are they a different color on the top versus on the bottom? Is it a rock? What kind of rock is it? What color? What minerals are in it? When you approach the world with an angle of curiosity, you'll find that everything is more interesting than you think it is. And that will always be the case. Because the closer you look at something, the more interesting it can become. I'd say that
Even a,
is
yeah,
something
even an
very important.
obstacle, right? Even an obstacle in life, right? You just be curious about it. Like, why is this happening? And when did it happen? And how do I feel about it happening? And kind of
Hmm.
dissect that. I love that, Ben.
What is that obstacle made of, right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and it really toughens us up. There's a in Dallas, around the uptown area of Dallas, there's a trail called the Katy Trail, and it's a paved trail. And in the middle was just a strip of grass that was uneven, and so one direction, the other direction. And I would, when I could, run on that strip of grass because there was always something you had to jump over. You had to pay attention to the obstacle, or to the dog do and the little divots and dips and things like that. And someone says, "Why are you running on that?" And I said, "Because it more emulates life. I don't want to just skate through my run.
I agree fully there. It's life isn't paved. And if your life is paved, you're extremely lucky. Or
Yeah.
maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe having a predestined flat life isn't something to have as a goal. That's
No.
something for me to think about.
I noticed on your web page, the picture of you, there's a didgeridoo.
Yes, there is.
That's
So
great. What is a didgeridoo?
a didgeridoo is a native Australian musical instrument. It is the oldest, or perhaps the oldest wind instrument in the world, with the oldest surviving one ever found, dated to be over 40,000 years old. Now, traditionally, they are made of eucalyptus trees that have been hollowed out by Australian native termites, which make them both. It, this is something you're going to appreciate. It makes them both a direct cause of the natural habitat that they exist in,
Mm,
as well as a direct cause of the human intervention to
mm,
hollow them out, to
mm,
carve them.
mm.
And so didgeridoos really could only exist in Australia
Wow.
for that time. Yeah, I think one of the things that makes it so unique is that it is a direct product of man coexisting with nature or humans coexisting with nature. Because without the termites, eucalyptus is a pretty tough wood. Hollowing it out is a lot of work. But without the humans, these hollow trees would just stay there and they would never become musical instruments. So I
Okay.
think it's such a cool concept that the marriage of these two sometimes seemingly opposite forces can create music,
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah. Do you, do you play it pretty well, or
I've been playing for about 11 years, so I'd
11
like
years?
to think I play it okay.
Yeah. It seems it seems very hard to play. It takes a lot of an out breath, right? Or an in breath. Is it, you have to be pretty breathy
Yeah.
to play?
You know, it's been so long since I was first learning how to play that I don't really remember.
Yeah, okay.
But I would say that, getting a sound on it isn't too hard.
Uh-huh.
But there is a technique called circular breathing where you breathe
Mhm.
out through your mouth and in through your nose simultaneously, so you never run out of air. And that people have difficulty figuring out.
You know NLP, so I just like my eyes went somewhere, right? Trying to figure
I
that
saw the
one out.
transderivational search.
I didn't come up with anything. We're going to wrap this up. Nature, the Drug of Choice is the title of this podcast. Ben, can you quickly answer why that is? Why nature is or should be the drug of choice?
There is no other place in the world, and evermore in sort of North American society, where you can get out, be in the quiet, surrounded by animals where we came from, and feel that peace. And there's a sense of connection that transcends culture, transcends time, transcends personal beliefs. And there's something right about being in nature. And I think that's what makes it the drug of choice.
Thank you. How should they find you? How can they find you on Instagram?
So they can find me directly on Instagram by searching at Herman Hypnosis, Herman Hypnosis.
Okay. And that's the same for your website, right?
That's the same for my website, hermanhypnosis.ca. And I think my Instagram is linked there. I'll have to double check.
Okay. Yeah, .ca. He's in Canada.
I am in Canada. The Canadian government actually gives discounts for the .ca registrar.
Oh.
And it's nice to show pride for the country.
Do you have your empowering statement for our listeners?
I do. What paved path have you been walking on that you'd be better off getting off of? And how will your life become more rich and complete once you do?
Wow.
So I'll repeat that. What paved path have you been walking on that you'd do better to get off of? And how will your life become more full and complete once you do?
Thanks so much, Ben. I enjoyed knowing you, and I know that we'll continue to talk, share things together, ideas. It's nice to have someone in the field that I relate to that loves nature. And
thank you, Valerie, for having me on this podcast.
I appreciate it.
It's genuinely an honor to be brought into somebody else's world and somebody else's art like this. So I appreciate it greatly. I'm free. I'm free.
The Hypnotic Hiker presents Nature, the Drug of Choice. Hypnotic trips, if you will, virtual hiking experiences, mind trips that offer a shift in perspective. Basically, these are a series of guided journeys that take you back to your true self. In these episodes, you'll discover the true power of your unconscious mind and how to change old, outdated programs from birth that have kept you stuck. You'll enjoy some virtual hikes, some hypnosis, divine interventions. You'll learn walking meditations. By the way, I've been a clinical hypnotherapist since 2002. We'll explore the importance of staying connected or reconnecting to your wild child, to be in touch with our primitive minds, our instincts. We'll talk about how the modern world has tried to change us into cogs of a machine. I'll dive into mass hypnosis and the concept of transhumanism. We'll even explore regenerative ranching and agriculture. The most important discovery you'll have is how to lose your shadow self and how to love yourself again, standing on your own 2 feet and thinking from your heart mind and speaking with your true voice. I'm Valerie, the Hypnotic Hiker.